This is Mike Fish from Minnesota Real Estate and Management, and today we're going to hopefully help people discern a little bit between possibly selling their house for sale by owner or hiring a good selling broker. And it might surprise you, after having conversations with folks, there are times where I've encouraged people to sell their house themselves. Okay. And I truly mean that. That's happened to me several times over the years. And I feel like the conversation for some realtors is almost like if you've seen the show The Office, right? It's almost like the realtor sounds like Dwight, where he's like, fact, selling your house with a real estate broker, the average sale is 25% higher, right? And at times it can be. So let's talk about that a little bit. So basically, the stats are around 18 to 25% higher between the average person that sells their house themselves or that hires a real estate broker. And it doesn't necessarily mean that hiring a real estate broker is right for you, okay? You know, most folks that I've talked to that are debating or looking to sell their house by themselves, there's really three primary reasons, right? Number one is to avoid that real estate commission, right? Is the realtor going to bring that much value to the situation? Number two, they've had bad experiences in the past with the last guy who just manipulated the situation and twisted things to get paid. Or number three, they feel like they have the ability to market it as well as a real estate broker. So let's talk about a little bit of that. Talk about a few different aspects. I've worked on the buyer side. I've sold FSBOs. I regularly will look at that market for my buyers if we're not finding something that's a good fit, or if they say, hey, I heard of this one. As a real estate agent on the buyer side, we'll contact for sale by owners and have that conversation and make deals with them. That does occasionally happen, but it is somewhat rare. So here are the things to consider if you're going back and forth. Should I just try and sell it myself? First, I would say if you're leaning towards maybe trying to sell it yourself, try and sell it yourself, okay? I've said that to many people, and I've had several of them try and sell it themselves. Sometimes they come back to me and they say, okay, let's get this thing marketed. Other times they're successful. So I don't want to take that away from anybody, but I will say there are a few considerations that we have to put in play, right? And the main consideration being massive exposure, right? So a real estate broker is doing professional videos, they're doing professional drone shots, etc. All their marketing, they're putting the property in the best light. Everybody knows they're throwing it on the MLS. But within 24 hours, it's propagated out to well over 10,000 websites, right? I'm a homes.com partner, and that's who I work with, closer. But everyone's heard of Zillow, everyone's heard of Realtor. Homes.com is up and coming in number 3. They've got some great advantages, in my opinion. But long and short, a real estate broker is going to put it on the market, and you're going to have that exposure, right? So the reason why that tends to be important isn't necessarily that a homeowner couldn't do that themselves. Now you've got all kinds of discount services and things like that, or realtors out there that say, oh, I'll put it on the MLS for $500 or $1,000. It's not that you can't get on the MLS, but there is an absolute trust factor with the 10,000 other realtors in Minnesota. And I always say realtors are a dime a dozen. We're all over the place. There's hundreds of us running around, right? But at any given time, those realtors do have access to the highest and best buyer. And of course, we want your house to be seen by thousands of people. The truth is, we're looking for one person, the highest and best buyer. And the truth is, the highest and best buyers are pre-qualified, and then they find an agent to watch their back and help them find something, help them negotiate, help them make sure that they don't get any, they're doing the inspections and all the legal things. So the highest and best buyers will, quite frankly, always have an agent. What happens with FSBOs when they throw them on is you're running into buyers that are purposely looking off market to get a deal, right? So you're doing a lot more tougher negotiation as buyers think that they should get some type of deal because it's not on the market, because realtors aren't helping the seller and helping the buyer. So aside from the, taking the time to do the professional objective pricing, the way we market it, the negotiation expertise, watching, protecting, you legally, we're, brokers like myself that are part of the association, we're using documents that are constantly updated, constantly done by the association through the attorneys to make sure that we don't have legal issues. In my years of doing this, I've never been sued. I've never been threatened to be sued. I've never, had an ethics violation, but I will tell you, I've seen them. There are things that can happen to a seller or a buyer, even with good intentions. I wish I could say that 1,000% of the time, every buyer and seller was happy for life. But there are certainly situations that happen that we're glad that we have the association and all the paperwork to make sure that everything's done right. So let's talk about that pricing a bit. Most people who are looking to sell for sale by owner, it's because they've sat down with a real estate broker and the realtor said, well, this is what I can sell it for. You're not going to get more than this. Okay. I will tell you that some people don't like my style, but they feel that I'm one of the more aggressive seller agents in the area, and we can talk about that privately, but because of the Sherman Trust Antitrust Act, we got to be a little careful when we're talking about commissions and pricing, in public. But I will say this, I never argue with the seller about pricing. My job is to give you a perspective to say this is the range that I think it's going to sell at if you want to sell it in this market. But I'm always willing to shoot for the stars. And I have over the years been surprised many times. I've sold houses for 50 to 100,000 plus higher than I personally thought they would sell for. So those situations kind of humble a guy where he says, okay, we can look at the market, we can give you good perspective, but what I'm not going to do is ever argue with somebody, that, boy, I'm telling you, this is what you're going to get for it. The bottom line is the market's going to decide what you're going to get for it, right? That one buyer, the highest and best buyer, is going to decide what you get for it. I always say it's the house down the road that's going to dictate whether you get that price or not, because it's a house down the road that's either going to be sold first or you're going to be sold first. And then you've got the appraiser, right? Those are the key factors that are going to determine what you're going to get for the sale of your property. So, a good agent isn't going to go in and beat you up about price. A good agent is going to bring value up and beyond that commission, right? All statistics say the average selling price, compared to for sale by owner or a real estate professional is somewhere, depending on where you're looking at, somewhere between 18 and 25%, which certainly covers any type of real estate commissions that might be paid because of professionals involved doing the job. The other part I would say is there is a security issue involved in it. Realtors, we've got the system set up. There's a handling of the showings, handling of the questions, but probably even most important is realtors, a good selling agent, a good buyer agent are going to work to get a deal done and help to take emotions a little out of that decision making to some extent. I always say it's almost like a rubber band getting wound up as a seller's going A, B, C, and D, and a buyer's going, well, what about this, this, this? And sometimes it can get somewhat tense emotionally for a seller or a buyer in negotiation. And that's a value that a good agent brings to the process, because what they're bringing is experience to help put things in perspective. Like, you shouldn't be, I wouldn't necessarily be offended by this because this is very common. Or we can probably expect A, B, C, and D, and then when we see those things, it's not necessarily an emotional thing because most buyers or most sellers are going to have this perspective. That's one of the big differeres between an experienced agent and an unexperienced agent. An unexperienced agent doesn't necessarily have the perspective to help people put their clients' issues in perspective. And most newer agents kind of go on that emotional roller coaster a little bit more rather than making sure that things are calm and in perspective, because these are massive decisions. They should be not made under pressure. They shouldn't be made emotionally, whether you're on the seller side or whether you're on the buyer side. So I am not going to try and talk you out of selling your home by yourself, for sale by owner, right? If you're leaning towards that, I would much rather have you try that and then give me a call if things aren't going the way you necessarily want them to go. I truly pride myself in believing and knowing that if someone hires me on the seller side or the buyer side, I am bringing much more value than my commission's worth. I always say if I'm not at least helping you that percent, then what am I doing here? So that's my thoughts on it. Again, I am the last agent to talk anybody out of trying to sell their house for sale by owner, but I will say these are some issues you need to consider, because the reality of it is the best and highest buyer is working with an agent, and that agent's probably not even going to see your place, let alone want to come in and try and negotiate and do a deal with you if you're not represented by a seller agent. So that's my thoughts on it. But again, thank you for your time. Our goal in doing these videos is to help put things in perspective, help potential clients discern what the best decisions for themselves is. So depending on where you're seeing this video, please like it, subscribe, stay in touch. We would love to earn your trust and earn your business. Again, I'm Mike Fish with Minnesota Real Estate and Management. Thank you.